on the what you explain in this long idea of the reptilian brain and the rise of morality, and you would say that we have a kind of duty, maybe, I think, in some sense, to the white race. Is it possible, on your perspective, that that could evolve to not be true in the future?
Yes and no. I mean, theoretically, yes, it could evolve. We could, through terrible practices, we could just breed an entire planet of raceless, historyless, loveless sociopaths, or just the absolute silly, guilt-ridden SJWs. Yes, theoretically, we could do that. But I think practically speaking, I don't think we could do that. Because as I've stated before, love of a people is evolutionarily advantageous. People who can work as a group, who can have a sense of themselves, a sense of being on a team, are going to win. And so, practically speaking, no. I think a planet of individuals could never exist. And in that sense of cohesion, religion certainly plays a huge part.
Okay, if we rely on the idea that evolutionary biology is the explanation for morals and these kinds of things, I mean, we see a lot of things in nature that aren't necessarily moral. I mean, we see predatory behavior. We see the weak being trampled by the strong. And you said earlier that if we have a totally psychopathic society, it doesn't seem to cohere. I would argue that we actually do see the rise of psychopathy in certain oligarchic families with certain rival religious groups or something like that, and they will actually degrade cultures. They will degrade societies through social engineering. We're watching this now with the Fortune 100 promoting social justice warriors and trannies everywhere. And so my criticism again is that if we believe that this is all merely evolutionary process, then we don't really have a basis to oppose it, because whatever happens is just evolutionary process. It's just the phenomena happening. It's just shit happening. It's just the tragedy of life. I mean, why fight for the people? Why fight for your existence?
That's not quite what I'm saying. You're raising some very interesting points, and I think in terms of this, global elite and so on being sociopathic and so on, yes, I think that's an accurate description. But you're leaving will out of it in the sense that we, as humans, we have reached a evolutionary singularity. I agree. As I've stated, morality is advantageous, no question. But the fact is, we don't want a world like that, and we are going to have to take responsibility. And that doesn't necessarily mean rationalizing a theology or so on. It means willing it, and it means forcing it to happen at some point. And we can come up with a rational justification for it afterwards. And I'll speak about this in somewhat abstract terms, but I think everyone can recognize what I'm saying. But yeah, and the other thing that I've said, I don't want to just accept the world as it is. There's no question. I'm not just a evolutionary thinker who says, "Oh, this is where we are right now. This is just the outcome of amoral, evolution. This is where we are." No, I want a different world, and there certainly needs to be will in it. We need to take responsibility for the world that we want, and the world will make sense when we force it to make sense.
I mean, would that require means like maybe at one point we should promote like pedophilia in another culture? I mean, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, no, I mean,
I get what you're saying, but I mean, I'm not that awful. I mean,
no, I'm not saying you are doing that or believe that. I'm saying that it seems like that kind of a position, if we don't believe that there are moral absolutes.
I think there are certain people, tribes, if you will, that actually seek to promote absolute degeneracy in rival bands. And we as white people, we don't do that because it's just sick. I don't want to like promote total absolute
No, I
degeneracy
wasn't
among the
saying that
Han
you.
Chinese. I know you weren't saying that, but the fact is, in order to face off against these people who do promote degeneracy, we might have to call upon a certain fighting spirit. We might have to become a monster in a way in order to kill this monster. And that is, again, a tragedy of our existence, in the sense that civilized, ordered societies are ultimately based on violence. They're ultimately based on someone who's willing to establish an order. And on top of that, violent foundation, there can be beauty and goodness and morality. But we might have to take responsibility for that and recognize the situation what we're in.
Right, but I guess I'm still just not understanding how, if we think that there's not moral absolutes, if we adopt that position and we believe in this kind of grand mythology that evolutionary biology explains all of this, why we are beholden to any of these things. I mean, ultimately, it might be something like, well, we should survive as a people. We need to survive. But why? There's not really any reason to prefer survival to suicide. It's really just.
Yeah,
whatever.
I mean, if I think we actually both agree on this, that so much of modern Christianities are debased. They aren't supporting a civilization in the way that
Sure.
they could or have. But if we can create a positive Christianity, in the sense that someone says the white race must survive in order for this universal truth to remain in the world, that we are the bearers of this greatness, then I would certainly support this religion. But I'm saying from an analytic perspective, again, I guess you could call me a kind of nihilist, in the sense I'm not an active nihilist or a passive nihilist, but I am speaking a tragic and dark truth, which is that for the world to make sense, for the world to be beautiful, we might have to force it to be that way. And if there is a motivating illusion that for the white race to survive, the white race must survive to maintain the mission of Christ and the greatness of the church, if that is a motivating illusion, then I would support it.
All right, Jay, do you have a response for that?
I mean, I've got a lot of other notes and stuff, but not on that specific point. No.
All right, why don't we move on? There were some other things that Richard said. I know you were kind of looking up that you wanted to respond to.
Yeah, there's a bizarre kind of reliance on Nietzsche, who was very, very critical of science, and especially scientism. Yeah. And I think we've seen in many cases science being politicized. I don't know if you would agree with the idea of big science, or the idea that science is in many senses controlled, especially at the university level, to not allow for things like discussion of race. I mean, that's
sure, obviously, yeah.
So why do you not, since you have a lot of skepticism for things like religion, why is there not a skepticism for something like grand narratives in terms of evolutionary biology?
I'm skeptical of that too. I agree that there are science. I mean, look, just because I'm skeptical of science doesn't mean that I think that science can't offer us a vision into the truth and a vision of ourselves.
Right.
No, I agree with what you were talking about in terms of big science. I also agree with a kind of Kuhnian understanding of the paradigms of science, in the sense that it's not so much that science doesn't just accumulate data in this linear progression towards the truth, that it actually goes and twists and turns. And so there are paradigms or revolutions, you could say, in the science, where after Copernicus, science was on a totally different footing. After Darwin, there was a new paradigm. There's going to be another paradigm after Darwin. Newton actually created a paradigm that is arguably superseded by the Einsteinian paradigm, but that doesn't mean that Newton wasn't giving us this profound glimpse at the truth. Again, I think that we can only grasp truth through a perspective. We can only glimpse it here and there. And even though I am skeptical of science, and I'm just saying this, that doesn't mean that it's invaluable or that it doesn't have something to offer us.
Well, I guess what I was asking was specifically about the evolutionary model as an explanation for morals and religion that seems to be fundamental to your thesis and why you have the worldview that you do. And I'm asking if there is this skepticism for a lot of things, especially as a person alt-right who's had to deal with establishment media. Other people have had to deal with establishment academia and had to leave because of not being PC, that we start to see that there's a kind of orthodoxy for the dark side, so to speak, in all of these spheres of life in a way.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that.
So is it not?
Are you skeptical of morality? Like the way that I would look at morality as well, and even Christian morality, particularly Judaic Christian morality, as also being a kind of weapon. I mean, one of the insights of the genealogy of morals, which is maybe even Nietzsche's greatest work. It's definitely a good starting point for anyone interested in this. Is that there is this earlier conception of good and bad, and bad is effectively weak. Bad is sick. Bad is degenerate. Bad is gross. Good means that it brings us power. There's and don't think of that in some awful way of Machiavellian way. Think of in the sense of like the family is good, because this is who we are. This is how we survive. Being powerful, being generating. This is good, and that there was the major revolution of Judaism was to flip that on their masters, people who dominated them. As you say, Romans were able to crush the Jews, crush their temples, literally and figuratively. They were the ruling caste over these people. We no longer are. And this was, in Nietzsche's view, a moral revolution in the sense that Jews got it in the heads of their masters that actually being good is being meek. Being good is being weak. Being good is being an impoverished nothing. And actually being bad, that's being strong. Being evil is being strong. And so that morality itself is will to power. Morality can be used as a weapon. And so much of what is directed against the identitarian idea or nationalism or so on is moral. I would say before all of these things that we face, like getting deplatformed or PC or whatever, we face it on the moral plane first. So it's not just that Richard Spencer is factually inaccurate or Richard Spencer is dumb. It's Richard Spencer is evil. Richard Spencer, it's even if he's right, he's still evil. And so morality in this way can be a weapon used against us. And I think so many of the fundamental reasons why white people aren't dominating the entire planet, as we certainly can, is because of this black cloud that has been hanging over us, this notion that our history is bad, that when we were in power, that was just awful and immoral and so on. And so really, we need to be skeptical of morality. We need to have a consciousness of morality and to start reforming a morality willfully that is life affirming and that is race affirming.